Then we get into the emergence of the automobile in the 1920s and the 1930s. I'm sure you have, of course, the mass production of reasonable cost automobiles. If you look at page 6 of your handout, here, page 6, you'll see our friend Henry Ford and one of his first vehicles. Henry Ford had his good points and his bad points. I won't go into all those things, but he certainly did create a large part of the early automobile industry, and that led to a demand for more paved roads. Of course, in the original days, paved roads were pushed for mainly by the bicycle people, the League of American Wheelmen and all that. But then eventually it was the automobile people that wanted it. Then you have, let's say on page 8, if you take a look at page 8, there's a little item I did for the Encyclopedia of New York State. Actually, no, I didn't do that. I did some others. Called the Long Island Motor Parkway, which is also known as the Vanderbilt Motor Parkway, which you may have heard of. Out here, ran from Queens, what is now Queens, about 40 miles out to Ronkonkoma. Here's Lake Ronkonkoma. It was a private toll road. It was actually originally, it was only for Commodore Vanderbilt and his buddies who could afford automobiles. It was their private road. Then it got opened up to the public for a toll. In fact, you can go out on Long Island now and see some of the old toll houses are still there. They're used for other things. They're like golf courses and things like that. But that was 1908 was the opening of the Vanderbilt Motor Parkway. Then we get into another thing I like to note is, being an engineer, the idea, what is the role of civil engineers and traffic engineers in the development of transportation? Originally, there were no traffic engineers. It was civil engineers who were building roads, because they had come originally from railroads. They were originally involved in building railroads. And then you got into things like traffic signals, traffic safety studies, marking signs, things like that. And so the traffic engineering profession kind of was born. And in the late 20s, a lot of the traffic engineers who were graduate civil engineers, some of them were, some of them weren't, because they came out of electrical engineering. Some of them had a physics background. And some of them didn't have a technical background at all, but they had experience in traffic matters. They wanted to join ASCE, the American Society of Civil Engineers. And ASCE didn't want them. They wouldn't accept them. So they formed their own organization called ITE, originally Institute of Traffic Engineers, now the Institute of Transportation Engineers. That's the genesis of how that happened. A lot of people are members of both. I'm members of both, but that's kind of what happened in the beginning anyway. Then the Bureau of Public Roads now is still there, but now it's part of the Department of Commerce. So it has a more broad application. It's not just for the farmers. The oil companies and the auto clubs were very important at that point in the 20s and the 30s and even into the 40s, because you didn't have GPS and you didn't have the maps that you had when you took a trip were from the oil companies basically, or from the auto club. So and in fact, many of the early signs on the roads were posted by the auto club. The government didn't have a big role in that at that time. That eventually changed. Then you also get the development of trucks and trucking companies. The whole idea of freight movement by highway starts getting introduced in the 20s and the 30s. So you had this building demand for better roads, which kind of was deferred by World War II. Kind of put that on the back burner as the demand was there. And I just want to show you one picture on page 7, I think it is, just to show you that congestion is nothing new. You can take a look at a picture at the bottom of page 7 of the approach to the Manhattan Bridge in the 1930s. Those columns are still there at the Manhattan Bridge. The cars are a little different now. In fact, I think it maybe moves a little better now, actually. I've come across it a lot of times. And again, pictures are misleading. They might have just been stopped, just for some little incident. But anyway, you had a lot of congestion in the 1930s also. And then finally, just in terms of New Jersey, we also have the beginning, it's not in your outline, of what's called the Lincoln Highway, which went across the country. It was mainly US 30, but also in New Jersey was what is now Route 27 in New Jersey was part of the Lincoln Highway at that time. Okay. Oh, I should mention, I told you about the references. Your handouts, there's a separate sheet, which I put in at the last minute, from the last month or two. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, on premium toll lanes. This is the idea of putting an extra toll on a toll facility for better service. Kind of a revolutionary idea. It's actually happening in Florida. You can read about it here.